Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to just take a second and, look around the room you're sitting in right now. Or, I don't know, if you're commuting, look at the road, the bridge you're driving over, the train tracks. We tend to think the modern world is built on technology, right? Or innovation, or the cloud.
But if you actually peel back the layers, I mean, if you look at the raw inputs that make the concrete stand up and the lights turn on, a staggering amount of it still runs on a lump of black rock.
A simple, dirty, crumbly black rock. You can hold it in your hand. Yeah. It gets soot all over your fingers, smells a bit like sulfur, and honestly, it looks completely uninteresting.
Right.
But this rock, coal, is arguably the most paradoxical thing on the entire planet.
It is a massive paradox. I mean, it defines that dual nature of progress better than almost anything else. On one hand, this rock is the battery that powered the whole modern world. It's the reason we aren't all subsistence farmers. It built the cities, forged the steel in our cars, and kept humanity warm through centuries of brutal winters. It completely broke the energy ceiling.
It's the hero of the whole industrial story. But then, on the other hand, it is the undisputed villain today.
Oh, absolutely. The bad guy.
It is the single largest contributor to the climate crisis. So the mission for this deep dive isn't just to rehash the politics, because we hear about phasing out versus phasing down all the time.
Right, we get that.
But to actually look at what this stuff is.
Yes. Let's go beyond the headlines. We need to look at the geology, the chemistry, the deep history. Because when you hold a piece of coal, you are not just holding a rock.
You're holding a time capsule.
You are. You're holding fossilized solar energy from a world that wasn't just different from ours, it was.
Yeah.
It was alien.
Okay, so we've got a massive stack of sources here. Encyclopedic records covering geology, history, economics, environmental science. And I want to start with that idea you just threw out. Fossilized solar energy. Because I think most people have this vague idea that, okay, coal comes from dead plants. Maybe they think of dinosaurs.
No dinosaurs. Not for coal.
No.
Yeah.
No dinosaurs. But the actual process of how a plant turns into a rock that burns, it's way more intense than just plants died and got buried.
It's so much more specific. To really get it, you have to transport yourself back to the Carboniferous period. We're talking 300 to 360 million years ago.
The Carboniferous, the name literally means coal-bearing, doesn't it?
Precisely. And if you stepped out of a time machine into the Carboniferous, the first thing you'd notice isn't the trees.
What is it?
It's the air. The atmosphere was hyperoxygenated. Today, oxygen is, about 21% of our air?
Right.
Back then, it was upwards of 35%.
Wow. Which, that sounds great for a morning jog, but I read that it had some terrifying side effects.
It allowed for gigantism in insects. Because insects breathe through these little tubes in their bodies, spiracles, and their size is limited by how efficiently oxygen can diffuse into their tissues. But with that much oxygen pressure, well, the limits were taken off.
This is the part of the research that honestly gave me nightmares. We're not talking about slightly bigger bugs.
Oh.
We are talking about dragonflies the size of hawks.
Meganeura. Yeah, wingspans of 2.5 feet.
And millipedes. Millipedes the size of crocodiles.
Arthropleura. A 6-foot-long millipede crawling around in the underbrush. So just, keep that image in your head. A hot, wet, hyper-oxygenated swamp buzzing with giant insects. But the stars of the show were the plants.
And these weren't our kinds of trees, right? Not oaks or pines.
No, nothing like that. The forests were dominated by lycophytes. We call them scale trees and giant ferns. They grew 100 feet tall, but they were strange.
How so?
They didn't have wood like we think of it. They had this thick, scaly bark, almost like reptile skin. And they reproduced with spores, not seeds.
So no flowers, no fruits, no birds singing, because birds, they hadn't even evolved yet.
Yep. Just the hum of giant bugs and the crashing of these weird spore trees.
And this leads us to what has to be one of the most fascinating theories in all of geology. It's called the lignin lag.
I love this theory.
It sounds like a band name, but it's really about, tree indigestion.
It's about an evolutionary mismatch. So here's the premise. Around 360 million years ago, plants evolved a new chemical compound called lignin.
Lignin.
Lignin. It's this complex organic polymer. It's the rigid stuff that makes cell walls hard. It's what allowed plants to stop being moss on the ground and start growing, vertical.
So plants figure out how to build skyscrapers, they get tall, they get structural, but here's the catch.
Nature hadn't figured out how to take them down yet.
Exactly.
In a balanced ecosystem, you have producers, the plants, and decomposers, fungi, bacteria. But lignin is incredibly tough chemically. It's like a fortress. And the theory goes that for millions of years, maybe 40 or 50 million years, trees had lignin.
But the fungi and bacteria just hadn't evolved the enzyme to eat it.
They could break it down.
That's incredible to think about. I mean, imagine if we invented plastic, which we did, but there was absolutely nothing on Earth that could break it down. Oh, wait, that's actually a terrifyingly accurate analogy for today.
It is, ironically. But back then, it was all organic matter. So these massive scale trees would grow, die, fall over into these swampy waters. But instead of rotting away, like a log does in a forest today,
It returns into soil in a few years.
just sat there. They didn't rot.
They just piled up.
Layer after layer. For 50 million years, dead trees, perfectly preserving their carbon, stacking up like a giant compost heap that never, ever composted.
And that massive pileup is why we have coal today. If those mushrooms had just evolved a little earlier, the Industrial Revolution might never have happened.
It's entirely possible. Now, I have to add a little nuance here because science is always updating.
Of course.
While the lignin lag is a great story and likely played a huge role, recent research suggests it's not the only reason. There are also massive tectonic factors at play.
Tectonic factors? You mean like the continents were moving around?
Exactly. At this time, the supercontinent Pangaea was forming. All the land masses were smashing together, and this collision created the Central Pangean Mountains, a huge range running right along the equator.
So you basically have these new Himalayas popping up in the tropics.
And climate modeling suggests these mountains created a massive monsoon zone. It caused year-round heavy rainfall, no dry seasons.
Which means the swamps just stayed wet.
Right.
Permanently.
And the trees fell into water that was anoxic. No oxygen. So even if there were some bugs or bacteria that wanted to eat the trees, they couldn't survive in that deep, acidic, oxygen-starved sludge.
So whether it was the lag in evolution or the specific swamp conditions from Pangaea, the result was the same.
Right.
Huge amounts of organic matter carbon were buried in mud before they could rot.
Precisely. We basically buried the atmosphere. We took the carbon dioxide the plants had breathed in, locked it in their trunks, and just shoved it underground.
And that buried pile of plants, that's what we call peat.
Peat is the precursor. Step 1. If you go to a bog in Ireland or Scotland today, you can see peat. It's soggy, brown, kind of sponge-like. It's definitely biological matter, but it's not rock yet.
Then comes the cooking.
Yeah.
The coalification.
Yes. So over millions of years, the continents drift, sea levels rise, and sediments, sand, mud, silt pile on top of that peat. The weight is just immense.
Like a geological pressure cooker.
That's it. It creates pressure, and deeper burial creates heat. And that process drives out all the volatiles, the moisture, the oxygen, the hydrogen, and it concentrates the carbon. It transforms the material from a biological sponge into a metamorphic rock.
And this is where we get the different ranks of coal, which I think is so important because we just say coal, but not all coal is created equal.
No, it matters immensely. If you're a utility company or a steel worker, the rank changes everything. Think of it as a spectrum of maturity.
Okay.
At the very bottom, you have lignite, or brown coal.
Brown coal. The sources describe it as almost woody still.
It is. It's the lowest rank, geologically young. It can be up to 70% water sometimes. It's a crumbly, low energy density, and it's arguably the worst for your health when it's burned because it burns so dirty.
Why does it burn dirty? What does that mean?
It's full of impurities. It hasn't been cooked long enough to become pure carbon, so when you burn it, you're boiling off a lot of water and releasing a ton of other chemicals just to get a little bit of heat. It's really the junk food of the fossil fuel world.
But we still burn a lot of it, don't we?
Huge amounts,
Yeah.
especially in places like Germany and parts of Australia, because it's often found right near the surface. It's just cheap to mine.
Right.
But then, if you cook that peat longer and deeper, you move up to bituminous and then bituminous coal.
Bituminous is your standard black coal.
This is the workhorse. It's dense, it's black, usually has these bands of shiny and dull layers. This is what fuels most power plants and what's used in steel making.
And its carbon content is, what, 60 to 80%?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But at the very top, the VIP of coal is anthracite.
Anthracite, hard coal.
It is. It's glossy, almost metallic looking. It's hard to break. And it has the highest carbon content, up to 98%, because it was subjected to the most intense heat and pressure. It burns with this pale blue flame, very little smoke, and incredible heat.
And there's a rule of thumb for finding this stuff, right? It's something called Hilt's Law.
Hilt's Law, a classic geological rule. It generally states that in a given area, the deeper you dig, the higher the rank of the coal you'll find.
Because depth equals more pressure and more heat.
Exactly. So if you find bituminous at one level and you keep digging, you might just hit anthracite.
So we have this biological battery, dead trees, buried, cooked, compressed until they're solid rocks of energy. But humans have been walking on this stuff for a long, long time. When did we actually figure out what to do with it?
That's a great question. We tend to link coal immediately with the Industrial Revolution.
Right. Dickensian London, steam engines, factories.
All that. But the history goes back thousands of years. I saw a note here about the Romans.
Yeah. In Roman Britain, they were digging up something called outcrop coal.
Outcrop coal, yeah.
What is that?
It's just coal that's sitting on the surface, exposed by erosion. They used it to heat their baths, and even for smelting iron on a really small scale.
Yep.
We've found coal ash in the ruins of Roman villas.
But then the Roman Empire collapsed, and Britain just stopped using it for centuries. They went back to wood.
They went back to wood?
Why? I mean, if coal is better, why go back?
Because wood was easier. If you live in a forest, you just chop a tree. It's right there. Mining is dirty. It requires effort. You have to dig a hole. And humanity generally follows the path of least resistance until we hit a wall.
And we hit that wall when in the medieval period.
A bit later, leading up to the 1700s. But there's a famous story in between. Marco Polo.
Ah, yes. The 13th century.
Marco Polo travels to China, and he writes back to Europe just amazed. He described black stones, which burn like logs. He was astonished, and he noted that because of these stones, the Chinese could keep their baths warm, allowing people to take 3 hot baths a week.
3 hot baths a week in the 13th century. That's a luxury.
It was a massive luxury. And he noted that even though there was plenty of wood in China, the population was so huge, they would have run out of fuel without these stones.
Wow.
They'd already figured out the energy density problem.
So China was way ahead of the curve. But the real explosion, the thing that changes the world, that happens in Britain. And it happens because of a crisis.
The resource trap.
Is that what it was?
In a way. By 1700, Britain was running into a huge problem. They had deforested massive parts of the country. They needed wood for building ships. The Royal Navy just ate forests for breakfast and for charcoal to smelt iron.
And just for heating homes.
Right. Firewood prices were skyrocketing. The poor were freezing. Britain was hitting a hard energy ceiling. They simply couldn't grow trees fast enough to support their economy.
They were limited by the solar collection rate of the current year.
Exactly. But they were sitting on an island made of coal. In 1700, Britain was already mining 5/6 of the world's coal. They had to. If they hadn't switched, historians estimate they would have hit a hard limit by the 1830s. They would run out of sites for water mills and run out of wood.
So coal broke the ceiling. It let them access the solar energy of millions of years all at once.
It was a massive inheritance. But there was a catch. As they mined more, they had to dig deeper. And when you dig deep in Britain, or anywhere, really what happens?
Water.
The mines were flooding. You couldn't get the coal out because you couldn't pump the water out fast enough with, horses walking in circles attached to buckets.
And this desperation is what drove the invention that changed everything, the steam engine.
This is a critical feedback loop. Thomas Newcomen and later James Watt, they didn't invent the steam engine to power locomotives or factories. They invented it to pump water out of coal mines.
That is such a rich irony. The machine that launched the carbon age was created specifically to get more of the fuel that powered the machine.
It was a perfect self-reinforcing cycle. The steam engine burns coal to pump the mine.
No.
The mine produces more coal. The coal makes cheaper iron and steel. The steel makes better, more efficient steam engines.
Which can then be put on wheels trains or on ships.
And suddenly this rock isn't just a rock. It's the fuel for empire. It's the fuel for speed. And it split the world into geological haves and have-nots.
If your country had coal like Britain, Germany, the U.S., you industrialized. You became a superpower. If you didn't,
you fell behind. And it centralized everything, too. Before coal, you had to put your mill on a river. You were geographically constrained. With coal, you could build a factory in the middle of a city as long as you could bring the rock to it.
And that gave birth to the modern industrial city, with all its wealth and all its smog. Which brings us to the modern era, because we're not just burning it in steam engines anymore. The uses are really specialized now. We need to distinguish between the two main types, thermal and metallurgical.
This is such a crucial distinction, and it gets lost in the general ban coal debate.
Okay, let's start with thermal coal. This is the electricity stuff.
Right. Thermal coal is for heat. The process is pretty violent, actually. The coal gets to the power plant and it goes into a pulverizer,
A giant grinder.
a giant mill that crushes the rock into a fine dust, like the consistency of face powder.
Why dust?
Surface area. You throw a big rock in a fire, it burns slowly. You blow dust into a fire, it ignites instantly. They blow this coal dust into a furnace, creates a fireball, boils water in tubes, creates high-pressure steam, and that steam spins a turbine.
So when you turn on a light switch in many parts of the world, Kentucky, Poland, huge parts of China, you're basically burning thermal coal dust.
You are. But metallurgical coal or coking coal is totally different. You don't just burn it, you bake it.
You bake it like a cake.
You put it in a massive battery of airless ovens, heat it to about 1,000 degrees Celsius, and because there's no oxygen, it doesn't catch fire. It pyrolyzes.
What does that mean, pyrolyzes?
It sweats. It sweats out all the impurities, the oils, tars, methane, hydrogen. And what you're left with is a hard, porous, gray rock called coke.
And coke is just pure carbon.
Almost pure. And coke is absolutely essential for making steel. You mix coke with iron ore in a blast furnace, and the coke acts as a reducing agent.
Okay, explain that chemistry. Why do we need the carbon?
Because iron ore isn't iron. It's iron oxide. It's rust. The iron atoms are holding hands very tightly with oxygen atoms.
Right.
To get the iron, you have to break that bond. You need a homewrecker.
And carbon is the homewrecker.
Exactly. At high temperatures, the carbon strips the oxygen away from the iron to form CO2, leaving behind pure liquid iron. You just cannot make traditional steel without this specific chemical reaction.
And that's why you hear people say, look, we can stop burning coal for electricity, but we can't stop using it for steel.
It is much, much harder to replace in steel production.
Yes.
People are exploring hydrogen as an alternative homewrecker to grab the oxygen, but for now, coke is the global standard.
Now, when we talk about who is using this stuff today, I mean, there's one giant in the room.
Yeah.
The numbers are just staggering. China mines almost half the world's coal and consumes more than half of it.
It's the engine of their manufacturing dominance. While the U.S. and Europe have been retiring coal plants, China has been building them. Although, even there, the dynamic is starting to shift.
Well, let's talk about that shift, because this is where the economics get really interesting. It's not just about environmentalism. It's about cold, hard cash. There's this term, stranded assets.
Right. This is the nightmare scenario for any investor. Imagine you build a massive coal power plant today. Costs billions of dollars. You plan to run it for 40 years to make your money back.
It's like taking out a 40-year mortgage on a factory.
Exactly. But 5 years from now, solar and wind power become so cheap and battery storage becomes so effective that it's actually cheaper to build a new solar farm nearby than it is to just buy the coal to feed your existing plant.
Wait, so the cost of operating the old plant is higher than the entire cost of building a brand new renewable one?
That is the crossover point. And we are hitting it in many, many markets. So your billion-dollar coal plant becomes a stranded asset.
A giant concrete paperweight.
An investment that has lost all its value before its useful life is over. And this is the risk that financial markets are looking at right now. Investing in new coal is becoming financially toxic, not just environmentally toxic.
Banks just don't want to lend money for a project that might go bankrupt in a decade.
Precisely. The market is moving faster than the policy in some places.
Speaking of toxic, we have to go there. We have to talk about the dark side, because for all the benefits coal brought, the hot baths, the steel, the electricity the bill has come due, and the cost is high.
It is incredibly high, and it's not just about future climate risks. It is about immediate human health.
The famous historical example being the London smog.
The Great Smog of 1952. That was coal smoke, just trapping the city. Thousands of people died. But today, the killer is more invisible. We look at particulate matter PM2.5.
These tiny, tiny particles released when coal is burned.
They're less than 2.5 microns wide. I mean, for context, a human hair is about 70 microns. These particles are so small that when you inhale them, your body's natural filters, nose hairs, mucus, they can't stop them.
So they go right into your lungs?
They pass right through your lungs and enter your bloodstream.
They get into the blood.
Yes. They can travel to the heart, the brain. They cause systemic inflammation. This leads to strokes, heart attacks, respiratory disease.
And the stats in the source material are just grim. An estimated 800,000 premature deaths annually globally linked to coal.
And some studies say that's a conservative estimate, and we can't forget the minors. Black lung disease, or coal workers' pneumoconiosis, is still a very real, very horrific way to die.
What actually happens in black lung?
You inhale coal dust over years. Your lungs can't clear it, so your body tries to wall it off with scar tissue. Your lungs literally harden and turn black. You lose elasticity. You just slowly suffocate because your lungs can't expand. And tragically, we are seeing a resurgence of it in some areas, even with modern safety equipment.
There was also a detail in the sources that really surprised me. We all worry about nuclear power and radiation, but coal ash, the stuff left over after you burn the coal, it's actually radioactive.
It is. This is one of those facts that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's just basic geology. Coal contains trace amounts of uranium and thorium. They're naturally occurring in the rock.
But trace amounts are harmless, right?
In the rock, yes. But remember, we are burning the rock. We burn away the carbon, the organic matter, which is most of the weight. But the uranium and thorium, they don't burn. They're left behind in the ash.
So you are concentrating the radiation?
By a factor of 10 or more. So the fly ash, the stuff that's caught in the chimneys, can be significantly radioactive. Living near an unshielded coal ash dump can, in theory, expose you to more radiation than living near a properly shielded nuclear power plant.
Wow, that really flips the script on how we perceive risk. And then, of course, there's the environment.
Climate change is the big one. Coal is the single largest contributor to the growth in global CO2 emissions. It's just so carbon heavy. It releases more CO2 per unit of energy than oil or natural gas.
And the targets are brutal. I mean, if we want to meet the Paris Agreement goals keeping warming below 2 degrees Celsius, we essentially need to have coal use between 2020 and 2030.
Have it. In a decade. While China and India are still building plans to support their developing economies, that is a monumental challenge.
But there's another environmental impact that's even stranger, more cinematic, the forever fires.
The coal seam fires.
Have you ever heard of the Brennenderberg?
The burning mountain in Germany, yes.
It's a coal seam fire, but here's the wild part. It has been burning since 1668.
Wait, 1668, like Isaac Newton times.
Yes, continuously. And these underground coal fires are a global phenomenon. You have them in the U.S. Centralia. Pennsylvania is the famous one that inspired the Silent Hill games.
Right.
You have them in China and India. How does a rock underground stay on fire for over 300 years?
It just smolders. A coal seam catches fire, maybe from lightning, a forest fire, or often human error. Because it's underground, oxygen just seeps in slowly through cracks in the soil. It doesn't roar like a bonfire, it creeps. It just eats the coal seam inch by inch.
That sounds terrifying. The ground is literally burning beneath your feet.
And they are incredibly hard to put out. You can't just spray water on them. The heat is so intense, the water just turns to steam instantly. They release massive amounts of CO2, mercury, toxic fumes.
So we have a fuel that kills us when we burn it on purpose and also burns itself underground for centuries. It really feels like we are dealing with something primal and dangerous here.
Which is why the whole conversation has shifted to mitigation. You know, if we can't quit cold turkey because of steel, because of the developing world's energy needs, can we make it cleaner?
Clean coal. We hear that term in political ads all the time. Is it? Is it real?
Well, you have to look at what they mean by clean. The definition has shifted over time. Originally, back in the 80s and 90s, clean coal meant scrubbing out the sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides.
The chemicals that cause acid rain.
Exactly. And we actually did a pretty good job with that. I remember learning about acid rain in school, but it's not the headline news it used to be.
That's true.
Regulations force power plants to install scrubbers, basically, these showers in the smokestacks that use limestone to trap the sulfur. It worked. Acid rain in the West has dropped significantly. So in that specific sense, coal did get cleaner.
But today, when politicians say clean coal, they aren't talking about acid rain, they're talking about CO2.
Right. Today it implies carbon capture and storage, or CCS.
Yeah.
This is the idea that you can capture the CO2 before it leaves the chimney.
How does that actually work? Do you just put a bag over the chimney?
It's chemical engineering. You bubble the exhaust gas through a solvent, usually a chemical called an amine, that acts like a magnet for CO2. It just grabs the carbon.
Yep.
Then you take that solvent, you heat it up to release the CO2 as a pure gas, you compress it into a liquid, and you pump it deep underground.
So you're basically putting the carbon back where we found it.
The physics works. We can do it. The problem is the economics. It is a nightmare.
Why?
Because it's incredibly expensive to build these facilities, and it lowers the efficiency of the power plant. You have to use a lot of energy, they call it the parasitic load, just to run the capture equipment. You might use 20% of your electricity just to catch the emissions.
So you're burning more coal to get the same amount of power just to catch the smoke.
And unless there's a massive tax on carbon, it is always cheaper to just dump the CO2 into the air for free.
Yeah.
That's why, as of 2024, only a handful of plants worldwide are using CCS effectively at scale. It's currently more of a hope than a widespread reality.
And this leads to some tricky language in international agreements. I saw the terms abated versus unabated coal.
This is the loophole.
Yeah.
If a country promises to phase out unabated coal, they are saying we will stop using coal plants that don't have carbon capture.
But since almost no plants have carbon capture.
It leaves the door open. They can say, we are building this new plant, and it will be abated eventually. Or they can count a plant that captures only a tiny fraction of its emissions as abated.
So abated is the magical future coal that doesn't ruin the climate, but unabated is the dirty reality we have now.
Precisely. And the danger is relying on a technology that hasn't scaled yet to save us from a physics problem that is happening right now.
So where does that leave us? I mean, we've looked at the geology, the giant bugs, the lignin lag. We've looked at the history from Romans to the Industrial Revolution. We've seen the economics of stranded assets and the horror of the health impacts.
It really feels like a turning point.
It feels like coal is this incredible double-edged sword that built civilization and now threatens to tear it down.
I think that's a fair assessment. Coal is a concentrated battery of ancient life. It allowed us to break through the energy ceiling of the 18th century. It gave us the modern world. It gave us steel, fast travel, light in our homes.
But the bill has come due.
It has. It's like we took out a high-interest loan from the Carboniferous period, and the collectors are knocking at the door.
And the question is whether we can pay it off. The transition is happening. I mean, the UK, the birthplace of the coal revolution, closed its last deep mine in 2015. They just shut down their last coal power station.
The economics of renewables are winning.
Yeah.
But the sheer inertia of the coal infrastructure, especially in Asia and in the steel industry, is massive. It's a very heavy ship to turn.
It really makes you think about how we define eras. You know, we talk about the Stone Age or the Bronze Age as these ancient things. But looking at the data, looking at the smoke in the air, are we still in the coal age?
We might just be living in the tail end of it. The coal age has lasted a few hundred years, a blink of an eye in geological time, but an eternity for the atmosphere.
And here's the thought to leave you with. Final provocation.
Go for it.
Coal is fossilized sunlight. It's energy from the sun that hit the Earth 300 million years ago, was captured by a tree, buried, and saved for us. We are literally burning the past.
While right outside, the sun is shining today.
Exactly. The sun delivers more energy to the Earth in a single hour than humanity uses in an entire year. And the race now is whether we can switch to using current sunlight solar power fast enough before the smoke from the past chokes the future.
It's a race between the sun that shone on the giant dragonflies and the sun that's shining on us right now.
And the winner of that race will determine the climate for the next few thousand years.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. Just the fate of the biosphere.
A fascinating deep dive into a humble black rock.
Thanks for exploring it with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.